Hi, everyone. This is the Efficiency Equation, a show for plant managers spilling hard-earned wisdom and secrets in the search for the efficiency code in liquid manufacturing. I'm Constantine, together here with Eugene, and today we're hosted by Dan Rennie. Let's dive in.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome. This is episode 3 of the Efficiency Equation podcast. It's great to have you with us. I'm joined by our usual co-hosts, Eugene and Konstantin Paradisov. And today we're going to jump into a topic that is near and dear to our hearts. And the reason that is so is because anytime we sit down with plant managers and even IT directors, and we start talking about the common problems and pains of life when it comes to running an operation at a bulk liquid manufacturing plant, then you can bet that within 5 minutes, the conversation is going to shift to transportation. Getting stuff out the door and to customers on time every time is no easy task. We're dealing with multiple modes of transportation, and you've got to sync up everything that's going on in the plant and align it with customer expectations and deal with your logistics service providers. So it's a big mess to get straight. That is unless you have a good system that helps you. And the gentlemen who are co-hosting this show are pretty much experts at that. And it's safe to say that they've seen most everything under the sun when it comes to transportation problems. And what we want to take a look at now are the most common issues that they see popping up and how to resolve them, what to think of, how to approach these problems if you want to better and smoothen out your. So, gentlemen, that was a long intro, but welcome. Let's dive into what comes to mind when we say transportation problems. Obviously, we've got the modes, but what is like the single number one top problem that keeps coming up in conversations?
I'd say bottlenecks, and the bottlenecks may be different by mode of transportation, but when we think about different sites that we've been to, that we've seen, you have some sites that have scheduled order pickups and some sites that don't have them scheduled. And with the scheduled ones, you are able to run the site very efficiently, where every so many minutes, less than an hour, you're sending off a truckload of product. And with bulk liquids, those would be tank wagon trucks. And when you have so many trucks going out the door, it is important to make sure that they actually show up on time. And there are times when they don't show up on time. And if you think about it, if everything runs smoothly, then the production planners are able to plan ahead for a specific point in the day when a certain tank is going to have a product. The carrier is going to show up, pick it up, and then in an hour, you have that tank now available that you can use for other production needs. And so this cycle continues. And they're able to deliver tanks filled with product and trucks out the door all around the clock. But when the truck doesn't show up, and it might be 2 hours late, 3 hours late, or whatever, then that creates a bottleneck. And now you need to have a good process to actually be able to see that and work around it quickly. And so this all goes back on the production side, it goes back to spare storage capacity. Do you have other tanks that you could use to store product while this tank is tied up and you can no longer proceed with the production schedule as planned? So we see that issue a lot. And I think in places where there's a good process with integrated systems in place, the planners and the operators on the ground can overcome that issue relatively quickly with the minimum amount of pain.
Yeah. Eugene, do you have any stories that come to mind when it comes to tank wagon trucks and the difficulties and scheduling and bottlenecks?
I could say that there are many issues when things happen either at the carrier location or somewhere on the road, and the trucks just can't get there on time. And the basic go-to in this case is to try and rearrange the schedule and load another truck that might be available for loading. Another good solution that companies employ is to have tank wagons or the tankers on site that are loaded without having the actual carrier show up. Uh, that is also something that can be used when the problem with truck deliveries come through, when there's no truck coming up for whatever reason. You can pull in an empty tank wagon and just fill in that order and then put it back on the parking lot and then potentially resolve that situation that way. But that depends on whether you have such empty trailers available to you, whether you have space at the plant where you could have those trailers available, how many loading locations inside the plant you have, how many trucks you'd be loading at the same time. All those constraints come into play when you talking about having good flow of tankers being loaded at the plant. And unless you address some of them ahead of time, saying that, okay, if this happens, this is our way of dealing with it, it can lead to quite prolonged stoppages at the plant where you say, okay, well, I'm out of storage tanks. I don't know where to put the product now. What am I going to do? So you really want to make sure you avoid that, and having proper tools in place that allow you to deal with these situations proactively, saying, okay, well, if this happens, I have these things that I can do. These are my backstops, basically, if something happens, if this happens or if that happens. And having a system in place is definitely makes it easier to deal with things like that.
Yeah. Speaking of having a system in place, when you approach a plant and they require an IT solution to their transportation problems, what are the first things you look at? What are the first things you ask for? So what needs to be in place in order for you to provide an automated solution?
I'm not sure if there's an automated solution for everything, because there's just too many different things that can influence the schedule. But there are certain things that you would want to make sure you have good information on, and that would be, do you have, what kind of agreements do you have with your carriers? Do you schedule appointments based on date only, or maybe date and time? The more granular your scheduling is, the higher efficiency in scheduling you need. So if you're looking for a system that could potentially help you out, it will have even more impact on your operations the more granular you want to operate. So if you really want a clockwork of operation where everything is scheduled down to the minutes, and you want to make sure everything is tick-tock with the loading, with the getting trucks in, getting trucks out, that's where this having system in place would really pay off even more. Some plans might be smaller and running with just a date only, saying, well, we have a few products that we load, and it's okay if you just come in on the date, but we don't really care what time you're coming in. In most cases, that is for packaged orders, but it could be for bulk as well. And in that case, the system will still help, but you have more leeway, because you would end up with saying, okay, well, I'm loading it during this day, so my planning is already less efficient. I just have to make sure that I have that product available during the whole day, that the trucks can come in. So knowing the capacity of the plant, how much product is normally shipped during the day, how many loading locations within the plant you have, what kind of appointments you're making, is it date based or date and time based? All these factors, they definitely help in deciding which way to go when you configure a system in place, whether you need a system or not. In most cases, having something will definitely help you out, but the more efficient and the more granular you get, the more benefit you will have from having a good system in place.
Right, right. We almost got a bit ahead of ourselves, diving into systems. But before we do that, because we're going to come back to systems, what's the deal with box trucks? Because we talked about tank wagon trucks. What's the deal with box trucks? Because that's another fairly popular mode of transportation.
Right. So what we call box trucks is basically any truck that is not a tanker, right? It's a truck that can carry packaged goods, normally on pallets, because it's easier to move pallets around rather than separate boxes, right? So we're talking about a box truck that could be just a box right on the truck, or it could be an 18-wheeler trailer. But anything that carries pallets, basically, that's our reference for a box truck in this case. And yes, normally that would be your packaged orders, and normally in some kind of cartons or boxes that are put on the pallet. It doesn't have to be. Sometimes it's drums, right? Sometimes it could be drums on the pallet, and you can treat drums as a semi bulk. So because it's not a small package, it's already a heavy, bigger volume. And you can also have totes, which is even bigger than drums, and you would have like one tote is your pallet basically. So it's a big container. But still, we kind of refer to them as packaged orders to separate them from the whole tanker of product. And you have a couple of different things here that you're dealing with. Sometimes you package product to an order where you have specific orders that you fulfilling, and you package the product right for that order. That is more like in just in time type of packaging. Or you could package the product ahead of time when you don't have a specific order yet, and just put it away in the warehouse that you have for whenever it's needed. Whenever the order is actually comes in and you want to pick for it, you have the product to pick from the warehouse. So you can package to order, or you can package to stock basically. And packaging to stock is the way to just have the warehouse being refilled with the product before you even have orders for it, based on the forecast, obviously, based on knowledge that the orders will come in.
Oh yeah, so you need an accurate forecast for that.
Yeah.
That's a that's not a small detail there.
And it also kind of comes back down again to, where do you get that forecast, right? Is it easy to know how much product do you want to package? Is it easy to see that based on the time of the year, maybe based on some other conditions, you can say, okay, at this time, we need to have at least this much product available in the warehouse because we anticipate this many orders coming through for this much of this product. Is it easy to see that? Usually having good foundation as some kind of software system that can show you this is a good start, because then you don't have to worry whether or not you're basing your forecasts on measuring the wind, how the wind blows, or where you have the actual data that shows you that, okay, based on previous history and all these factors, your levels probably should be like this. And it's a much easier game to play in that case. And again, the appointments come into play, knowing whether you make appointments, whether you make appointments with specific time. All those things factor in how much efficiency you can get out of the whole setup, having a backbone of a system to rely on, whether you have single customer shipments where you ship a whole truck to the customer, it's the easiest, whether you have less than truckloads, when you just have a couple of orders that you add to an existing trailer that comes in, whether you have your own trailers, whether you have trailers that are being given to you by the customer, scheduled to come in by the customer instead of yourself, whether you have trailers that you load with multiple orders with multiple customers. All those things come into play in how difficult is all of this to do without proper tools, right? If you have just bare bones of tools like Excels and paper, it will be much more difficult to have something like this flow efficiently.
Yeah.
That's where integrating this whole transportation pain point, proper tooling, will allow you to remove the pain point and be more efficient.
Yeah.
And there are other things that I can name, obviously, that go with it, that having the tools will help you with. For example, let's say you're loading a truck and you have 5 or 6 orders to put on the truck. You need to know whether or not they will actually fit into the truck, right? So You want to make sure that whatever product you're loading will, first of all, fit the number of pallets that the truck can fit, right? Second, maybe some of the product that you're loading might be heavier than other, right? You may be loading potato chips, or you can may be loading food, vegetable oil, right? And there's a very different weight to it. And you need to make sure you do not overload the truck, because there are certain limitations as to how heavy the truck can be when you put it on the road. All those things are harder to track if you don't have proper tools, right? You want the tools to tell you that, yeah, okay, you're putting this 5 orders on the truck, it's going to be overweight. So you need to, reduce the number of orders that you can put on the truck, for example, right? That's one example. The other one would be document generation. When the truck actually comes in and gets loaded, you need to generate all the documents, the bill of lading, the packing lists, everything, right? How easy is that? Do you have the tools that just spit it out for you? Or do you have to actually go into some templates and put things in manually? All of that is, again, either reducing or increasing your efficiency with the whole transportation situation. Does the system allow you to electronically sign documents? For example, if the driver needs to sign, can he sign it once and be applied to all the bill of ladings that are on the truck? This creates efficiency. Or do I have to sign 10 times? Even simple things like that, they can drastically increase the throughput
Yeah.
of the plant.
Yeah, I bet that a bunch of items that you just listed, they also pertain to other modes and not just box trucks. So what comes to mind next is rail cars. And I don't know, Konstantin, if any bottlenecks and any issues come to mind when you hear transportation issues and rail.
Yeah, so with rail cars, it's a whole different beast. And, the way the railroad system works is most of these companies don't own their own locomotives. So they will call the railroad company and tell them, oh, okay, we need to pick up these rail cars. They're filled, take them away to the customer. And the same thing with bringing them in. It's a whole layer of communications and logistics there. And so the funny thing, whenever you look at the railcar deliveries, is how they operate through their network, because there are certain limitations with how they connect all these rail cars that came maybe from your plant, but then also some from other customers. And so when our clients see the rail cars in transit, they would frequently see that the rail cars might move elsewhere in the country before they actually move any closer to your destination. And the railroad carriers, they typically request very large time frame to get your rail car to where it needs to be. So you might be checking a few days later after you sent the rail car out on some website to see where it is, and it's not getting any closer to where it needs to be. But then on the site logistics side of things, it also, because it has higher capacity, it also takes a lot longer to fill and to unload. And so the process of filling it, because it takes longer, it also has some separate handling, whether you do it with the pen and paper process or whether you do it in the system. You have to make sure that while you're filling it, your process is robust, and there are certain examples when these plants had manual processes, and they shared some stories where they would occasionally overfill the tank. And when there are no sensors to stop it, you have this massive hose filling the tank, and then it just goes over the top, and now you have product on the tracks. And think about this. So if it takes several hours to load that rail car, and your operator doesn't actually stand there to watch all of that time, but instead they go from spot to spot doing their other work, and then they come back to that rail car. Say it started overflowing, but the operator comes back only half an hour later after the start of the overflow. In that half an hour, the flow rate is so high, you're going to have a lot of product on the tracks. And so this is one of those things that is fun to see when you visit some locations that are less mature and have fewer systems in place to kind of safeguard against this. Do they have soup in their tracks, or are the tracks immaculately clean? And so that's one of the things. Like once you have the systems that take care of the process, you don't have this anymore. Of course, having sensors to prevent overflow is nice, and I wish everybody had them. But even if you don't, you just have to make sure that your processes for like filling and going through all the steps to get the rail car out are well laid out and that they're tested, and things like this can be prevented.
I have a question for you, Tan. For example, let's assume that you are running a warehouse and you have, let's say, five to 10 pickup orders for box trucks, right? For you. So you're loading pallets on trucks, 5 to 10 in a day. And you're done with loading and you see that for some reason you still have product that you thought you're going to load, but you didn't. In absence of the system, of any system, right? And having just papers and whatnot. What do you do? What would be your steps like to figure out what's going on?
Well, first, I would scratch my head. Then I would scratch my head even harder, and then probably convince myself that what I saw doesn't even exist.
Okay. Well, that's
Something.
one way to do it.
Yeah.
You'd probably start looking through papers, say, okay, well, I have these orders that I was supposed to get to load today. Oh, this one didn't come. Oh, this one didn't come. Okay, so what am I going to do now? Let me go find out who the contacts are for these particular clients and maybe call them or email them, let them know that the product wasn't picked up, that they need to rearrange it, right? So there's a whole bunch of processing that's now manually has to be done, right? Now imagine a system in place and imagine that it's not 5 to 10 orders, but let's say 100 orders and that you need to put on, right? So how can you do 100 orders manually tracking which ones weren't picked up, right? So that's basically, it becomes untenable. You just can't do it. Having a system in place, first, it will potentially send reminders to the clients, right? Before they even have to come in, saying, hey, by the way, you have a pickup in 5 days. Make sure to come pick it up. And then maybe 3 days later, it says, hey, by the way, you have a pickup in 2 days. Make sure you send the truck, right? And then let's say that they still haven't, haven't come to pick up the load. Well, the system can see it automatically. And when the loading is done for the day, it can say, well, these 5 orders weren't picked up, even though they were supposed to. Let me notify everybody who's involved to make sure that this, gets fixed, that a new scheduled pickup date is set. All of that can be done without any manual tracking or reconciliation. It's all done by the system. You don't have to worry about it. You just have to make sure that you've set up all your contacts and the system is running and configured properly, and that's it. You're done. You don't have to worry about any of that. In addition, your system might integrate with EDI, which is the electronic data interchange that allows you to communicate with, let's say, carriers and customers, right? Electronically. So each order, when it's loaded, can be advised to the customer saying that it's loaded. And they get it through EDI or through email saying, oh, my order was loaded. Great. As the truck goes on the road and goes through its path to the client, you get updates from the carrier, again, through EDI, for example, saying that I'm at this point of my route, or I'm at this point. So you have a whole big blob of information that helps you identify issues or just simply track things without lifting a finger. It's right there. You don't have to go and dig through papers. You don't have to call anybody. It's all right there. So having proper tools in this case, again, it just makes you much more efficient. It's not to say that you have nothing to do. It's to say that you can do much more and more efficiently.
Exactly. Exactly. Okay, Constantine, I'm throwing a ball to you. So some other modes of transportation include like cargo, ships, vessels. What's your pick? What's your favorite type of problem among these?
So I have a few. Oh,
You just love problems, don't you?
yes, with the ships, usually there is this issue that when your product comes in and it's brought in with a tanker ship and they need to offload it at the port and then transfer it to your facility, there is because the ship is handled by another company, and usually there is a surveyor company that will come out and examine that the ship is good, the seals are all good, nothing has been tampered with. It's assumed that a third party is doing the quality checks, and then you get issues like, okay, now after they did them, we need to get those quality inspection results into our system or to our site so that we can keep track of that and make sense of it. Did they do everything they were supposed to do? And I think after that, the biggest issue is this kind of information. It doesn't get lost, but it sort of very quickly becomes hard to find because this is usually all manually communicated. It would be some documents in somebody's email. And then whenever an issue happens a month later, and because ships deliver these huge quantities, it's very normal that they would deliver a lot of product and the plant would still operate off of that ingredient for a month after that. And so a month later, you have questions about, oh, we have some quality issue. Where did this product come from? And now to track it back to where it came from, what ship brought it in, this is one of my favorite issues because this is even when people have systems, you have to take an extra step and talk about it to get this done right where you can track it. Because in a lot of cases, it's still manual tracking, digging through emails and trying to find where is that point where this product came to your plant, and you then check, did the quality meet the standards there or was there something iffy there? So there's that issue. And then, when you have storage containers, the shipping cargo containers that are used to send product from one country to the next, and there may be some kind of rare ingredient or something special that makes sense for your business model. When you get that, you then have to deal with extra logistics issues with demurrage and detention. So if you get a container on your site, now the shipping company wants their container back ASAP. But if you're holding on to it because you need to offload it and you, for whatever reason, you're taking your time, maybe you don't have spare storage capacity where you need to offload it to, you're going to pay fines for all the time that you're delaying that container. And of course, you don't want to run into a situation where that container is sitting there for so long that this is no longer a profitable business where you're doing this. So there are issues there. Of course, there are issues with the freight forwarders and those shipping companies because when they charge you for those containers, it's not as easy as just seeing a receipt from a store. They keep charging for the same container in bits and pieces over the course of months. So somebody needs to make sense of all that. So there's a lot of additional headache involved when you deal with that mode of operation. So you got ships, you got cargo containers, and then you got the tank wagon trucks, uh, the box trucks, the rail cars. All of these have their own unique challenges, and people have figured out how to deal with those. But you first focus on the process and try to make sure you see it all, what's happening, where your bottlenecks are, where your weaknesses are, then try to address them. And then the systems may help there. The one thing we haven't talked about is the unscheduled tank wagon operations. So when you are sending a product out, but you don't have a specific appointment for the carrier to show up. So that is important to note because there's still a lot of companies or a lot of sites that have that. And the difference between having appointments for the order pickups and not having them is how quickly you can reuse your storage capacity at the plant. So your production planners now can no longer use that same storage tank because it's occupied by the product that's sitting in it. And you're waiting for the driver to show up, and you don't know when they're going to show up. So that means your time horizon is much wider. And the planner has to make do with whatever they got without this. And only when the driver comes and picks up the product, now they can reuse that tank. So overall, over the course of a month, that mode of operation actually reduces your throughput. It reduces the plant's capacity to just bang out products. So when you start to ramp up production, that becomes very important.
Super. You know what? What came to mind is something that Eugene just said a few minutes ago, which is that when you start solving these problems, what's going to happen is not that you're not needed, it's that you can do other stuff and probably more valuable things. So what are some of the things that plant managers have been liberated to do once they started solving these problems? So I guess my question is, so whenever you implement automation and systems that make sense and that take out all the pain of planning and solving transportation problems, like what are some of the things that plant managers have not been able to do previously and now they are, thanks to having a system?
I could say that a couple of things come to mind, and it's not necessarily what they weren't doing and now doing, but rather than what can they focus on more than they have been focused on before, and is there any other side effect from it? So basically, I would say having it would allow you to focus more on product quality, whereas before you were busy making sure that you get the product out of the door on time and that you have storage tank available for the product after the order is picked up, and all those issues that come with transportation. They were just taking away your time. Now that this time is freed up to an extent, you can focus on making sure that your processes run better, that you have better quality of the product that you create, that you run more efficiently with your equipment, allowing you to potentially get more done, more product created, satisfying more customers and more orders. Of course, that also means that you have to sell more, but and that's usually not the plant manager who does that, but it frees up the people who do sell more to actually do it, saying our plants can actually handle the extra capacity now because we have the transportation issues, resolved or at least well handled. And that means that the personnel at the plant, including plant managers, but also the actual operators who do all the work, and the shipping personnel who does all the loading and logistics, they have more time that they could rededicate, refocus on actually having more orders processed in the same physical facilities, right? So you don't need a bigger plant to have more orders. You just need it to run more efficiently, right? And you don't need better equipment necessarily to have better quality of product. You just need to make sure that your processes are more focused on having quality, meaning that you can dedicate a little more time to make sure that the product is of higher quality. So that's pretty much the two things that I could point out right off the bat: is the focus on quality and focus on having more, potentially more product made and shipped, because now you have the time to do it without changing the actual physical plant. It's the same plant doing the same things, but because of the efficiencies that the system brings in, you're allowed to have higher quality now and more orders shipped.
I'd like to add to that. I'd say, besides having more time to do things and focusing on product quality, now they can focus on process quality. And so this allows them to get more business with bigger customers, because now as the throughput grows, the customers are going to look at their on time in full metric and say, well, this plant delivers most of their orders on time and in full, while this other location that we source from has more issues. So let's make more contracts with this provider. And the companies that would look at that are the bigger companies that like stability and continuity. So now, as we translate it back to this plant manager, the plant manager now has more time to look at this stuff and the tools to see this, to say, how am I doing with all the orders that are going out to the customers? Are we filling them most of the time how they're supposed to be filled? Are we delivering those orders on time? And of course, this is not just about when that particular order left your facility, but it's about, did it make it on time to the customer? And this period is more tricky. So you need feedback from the carrier to know this. This is where the systems help out a lot.
Yeah, I would say that it's a good point to add for sure. The whole point of saying that the process is improved, it's very true.
Yeah, and I think this is like the perfect scenario where you do something at the plant managerial level and you're directly impacting revenue and bottom line and strategic level initiatives. So like where you said, Konstantin, that, oh, so our service levels have improved, so now we can take on bigger customers.
Without a system, you wouldn't even know how to measure, right?
Yeah.
Those things that Konstantin mentions, the on time and full, how do you even measure that without a system? It's very difficult. So a good system that provides you this data is really important, just so that you can even begin to measure it.
Gentlemen, thank you so much. I'm really looking forward to episode number 4. Everybody, tune into episode 4 because it's going to be a surprise. But we're going to be tackling manufacturing execution problems or planning problems. All right. Thanks for showing up, and we will see you later.
All right. Thank you.
Thank you. Guys, thank you so much for sticking around. I hope you could find some valuable insights from this episode. We'll be releasing new episodes soon, so stay tuned. If you have any thoughts, ideas, comments, suggestions, or just want to chat, you can find us on LinkedIn. Links are in the description. See you next time.